The Holy Gospel according to John, the 1st chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, "This is the one I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me.' Out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given." The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
So have you seen those warnings that you get on the side of products? You've seen them, right? Do you always follow them? I don't. You know, you just, oh yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Well, I should have followed the warning that came with this particular sermon. This particular group of messages for the next 4 weeks in the narrative lectionary are regarding the creed. And the first thing they say is, you should only really preach this if you are passionate about the creed. And we all know how I feel about that. I mean, we don't use it very often, so I guess we know I'm not passionate. But oh yeah, I can do this, right? Well, I was still working on this morning. So I have no idea what you're about to hear. Not that I don't believe in the creed. Don't get me wrong. The Apostles' Creed doesn't say anything that I can't believe in. But it tends to be limiting. It tends to be kind of dispassionate, kind of stoic. It's kind of matter of fact. I see a smile. Matter of fact, because it doesn't have all of the beauty and the passion that walking with God has, because they're just words. Now, the creed comes from the 2nd century. So it's a good reminder that even what we did this morning is part of a very, very long, long history of Christianity. That we walk in the same path that our ancestors walked. It connects us with the past. And in that, it has a lot of reason to treasure it. It was used to instruct for baptism. And if you look at it, if you read it, it is pretty much a really good outline of instruction for someone to know what it is we as the Christian faith believe in. And the Christian faith, of course, has always had lots of people saying, no, it's this, no, it's this, no, it's this. And this creed is to bring us all together and unite us into one belief, one thought. And then from there, we all have our little idiosyncrasies or our opinions. But the creed is the basis of what we believe. So the beginning is, I believe in God the Father, maker of heaven and earth. Now, what do you do with that? You know, as I contemplated this, I'm thinking, how do I talk about a God that is so immense, he could create the universe? How do I even begin to describe a God that is so full of love, so full of passion for you, that he died on a cross? How can I possibly tackle this description? And guess what? I really can't. Getting to know God is a personal thing. It's something we each must do. It's a path we each must walk. God is there wanting that relationship with you. But get this, God knew about you and wanted the relationship with you back before the Big Bang, long before the Big Bang. God knew who you were. God knew who you would be. God knew the sins you were going to commit. God knew how you would go against his word, how you would deny him, betray him. God knew that. God knew all the things that my life would consist of. And God still loves us. How do you describe a God like that? That's why I say you have to experience this God. This is something that cannot be said in words. And perhaps that's my other problem with the Apostles' Creed, is we're trying to say an awful lot with words that just can't do it. God is bigger. Bigger than any words that we can come up with. Bigger than any creed that we might speak. God created the world. So why did he create the evil part of it? God created the world, and he created us with freedom of will, free will. And that was his mistake. I mean, let's face it. He wanted creatures who would choose to love him. Not who didn't know any better, but creatures who would choose to love him. And so he gave us free will so that we could choose to either love him or not love him. The bad things in this world that we know, I believe, are then the consequences of our free will. They're not the things that God has put on our lives as punishment. They're just merely consequences. And these things are going to happen, and all of creation, Paul says, groans under the pains of this process. But above all, God walks with us. God stays with us through the whole thing. Never leaves us. God is immense. We visualize God because we are human, and our brains are not immense. Can't fathom God. I can't, none of us can really come up with the words that would fully describe God. And so we visualize God as a person. We make him to look like a human being. That way, he becomes somebody we can have a relationship with. And so that's not a bad thing. Some of us have, as kids, saw God on this great big throne with a long white beard. Gandalf, right? Was it Gandalf the White? Yes. Well, he becomes the White, though, doesn't he? Oh, okay. Gandalf, that's what we envision, sitting up there on that throne. And that's great. But here's the problem with that. God is not some distant God that sits up on a throne, away from you, not being involved with you, not loving on you, not taking action in your life. Because God continues to create. And whenever something evil comes into our life, God takes and recreates that moment for something that can be used for good. So God is not this God that's way out there that we can't interact with. Rather, God is all around us. You remember what Paul says in Acts? For in him we live and move and have our being. God is all around us. We breathe God in on a daily basis. We touch God on a daily basis. The psalmist tells us over and over again that the creation is a display of who God is, of God's heart, God's glory. You know, when a painter paints a really good picture, what do we say? That he really put his heart into it. Well, God really put his heart into the creation. But knowing that we needed something more physical, that's why he sent us Jesus as the manifestation of who he is. God is immense. There's nothing in this life God can't walk through with you. God is love. There is nothing that God will not forgive us for. There is nothing that God will not embrace you. Even the worst of sins, when you go back to him, he puts his arms around you and says, I love you. This is the God of creation. I so wanted to bring in some pictures from YouTube and display them today. I haven't figured out how to make my God bigger than all the copyright laws yet, though. So I chose not to do that. But you've seen the pictures of the universe. You've seen the pictures of the stars that are out there. You've seen and you've heard that new planets, new stars, new solar systems are being created. And that's because we have a hands-on God who continues to create, continues to make beautiful things for us to learn about, for us to enjoy. I mean, you buy your kids some neat toys, right, so that they can learn. Maybe that's what the universe is. A neat toy so that we can learn to play with it. I don't know. But that's our God. Too often our God is too small. Too often we think our God is just for baptism, just for death, just for those times of sickness. But God is with us throughout it all, never changing. Luther writes, actually Melanchthon wrote, impress it upon our minds and remember it in everything we see and in every blessing that comes our way. Whenever we escape distress or danger, we should recognize how God gives and does all of this so that we may sense and see in them his fatherly heart and his boundless love toward us. Thus our hearts will be warmed and kindled with gratitude to God and a desire to use all these blessings to his glory and praise. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. How quick we say those words. And yet those words are so packed full of meaning that I have no way of expressing. But I encourage you to step out and get to know your God. Whether it be in nature, whether it be in a book you're reading, wherever God is reaching out to you. And find out how immense, how powerful, how incredible